From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks very much, Ollie. Welcome to Thursday's Richie Allen Show. How you doing? Are you well? Have you had a good day? It's November 1st, 2018. I've got a terrific programme lined up for you today. As usual, thanks for joining me.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Sure is indeed, yeah. Right, let's do it then.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, the BBC is advertising a lot that it's got a brand new podcast coming up, Radio 5 Live. And it's about the Waco siege of 1993. They've entitled it End of Days, and it focuses on the British people that ended up going to stay with David Koresh and the Branch Davidians in Waco. But there's a lot about what happened at Waco that most people don't know, and I've invited Dick J. Reavis on the programme. Remarkable man is Dick. He's a reporter and an author of many books, including The Ashes of Waco and Investigation. He joins me this hour. You don't want to miss that. Dick J. Reavis joins the Richie Allen Show. And then later on, I'll be joined by Frances Leader. Now, Frances is an anti-fracking campaigner, has been campaigning against it for many years. And she got in touch with the programme in the last couple of days and said she's been very interested in our coverage of fracking with people like Tina Rosary and others. But Frances reckons that fracking is even more dangerous, and there are things about it and how it is performed and what it does that maybe we don't know. So she's going to join us in the second hour. Frances Leader joins the programme. It is Thursday's show. You can tweet me right now, and between now and 7 p.m. it's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. Yeah. How you doing? Good. Glad to hear it. Don't bitch to me. Don't bitch to me. Big story. Well, it's the big story here, at least in terms of the focus. Yeah, turn your mobile phone down, Richie. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. That's a rookie mistake, that right there. Right, done. Turned down. You heard Ollie Barrett there referring to Aaron Banks and the investigation of him by the National Crime Agency. His Leave.eu campaign has been accused of offences committed before the 2016 EU referendum. This is to do with financing now. He was referred to the Electoral Commission along with Liz Bilney. The watchdog says it suspects Banks was not the true source of loans to the campaign and the money had come from impermissible sources. Like I said, everybody's leading with this today. We'll talk about it very briefly. Sky News today on Aaron Banks.
Very good afternoon. The government has been urged to halt Brexit in light of a criminal investigation.
Halt Brexit? Yes, of course. Let's just stop Brexit because we think that one man might have breached spending rules.
Into how the Leave.eu's campaign was funded. Its head, Aaron Banks, is accused of electoral law offences supposedly committed during the 2016 referendum after the elections watchdog said it didn't believe he was the true source of £8 million in loans. Mr Banks has welcomed the referral to the National Crime Agency and called the allegations ludicrous.
Now, there's a man called John Craig and he works for Sky News. And he was dumped at Westminster about 2,000 years ago. John Craig is forever reporting from Westminster. He's been there as long as the knight guarding the Holy Grail in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. God love him. He's not a bad bloke, John Craig. Westminster reporter. He's been there since the year dot. He explains this pretty well. This is what's going on.
The statement has come from the Electoral Commission, from their legal counsel, a man called Bob Posner. Now, he says this: we have reasonable grounds to suspect money given to Better for the Country came from impermissible sources, and that Mr Banks and Miss Bilney, the responsible person for Leave EU, knowingly concealed the true circumstances under which this money was provided. This is significant because at least £2.9 million of this money was used to fund referendum spending and donations during the regulated period of the EU referendum. So, impermissible sources is what they're talking about there. Well, as you can imagine, the never shy and retiring Aaron Banks has hit back. He's actually tweeted today saying he's currently fishing in Bermuda, and he's posted a photo showing him posing in front of the ocean. But he said this in a statement, a defiant statement. He says this.
Just before we hear the statement, I love the fact that this guy, and regardless of which side you're on, and I've spoken for many years about the reasons everybody should run away from the federalist fascist superstate that is the EU. But regardless of what you think, you've got to be honest, Aaron Banks is an arsehole. With a capital A. Love the idea of him being in Bermuda, fishing and posting photographs of the beautiful sea and his catch. And God knows what else he was doing in Bermuda. But anyway, this is his statement, right?
This. I'm confident that a full and frank investigation will finally put an end to the ludicrous allegations levelled against me and my colleagues. There is no evidence of any wrongdoing from the companies I own. He says, I am a UK taxpayer and I have never received any foreign donations. The Electoral Commission has produced no evidence to the contrary. The Electoral Commission has referred me to the National Crime Agency under intense political pressure from anti-Brexit supporters.
Yeah, from the Remoaners. Now, did the Leave campaign break laws? Did the Leave campaign tell lies? Did the Leave campaign possibly break electoral spending rules? You bet your arse they did. This is real reporting here. Forget your identity politics and the side that you want to believe. We have to leave the European Union. There should not be a European Union. But of course they broke the rules and told lies. Right? Do you think the Remain campaign didn't? Think again. Of course they did. What this is about, of course, is the chipping away at the election result. Whatever lies, whatever spin, whatever social media manipulation was done by those on the right who wanted to push Brexit hard and wanted the UK to leave, there was equality. There was an equilibrium because the other side was doing it as well. People ultimately went out and voted Leave or voted Remain based on their own opinions. Right? Whether those opinions were right or wrong. But you can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. We're going nowhere. Front page of the Times newspaper today. This is also a big story. Could have led with this. The headline on the front page is PC Brigade wasting our time, warns top officer. Sarah Thornton, who's the chairwoman of the National Police Chiefs Council and one of the most senior officers in the UK, said police should focus on tackling burglaries and violent crime rather than worthy issues such as misogyny and historical allegations against dead people. She said there should be a refocus on core policing in response to increasing violence and record low conviction rates for crimes such as burglary. Thornton said investigating gender-based hate incidents and allegations against those who had died were not bad things to do, but she added they just cannot be priorities for a service that is overstretched. Here is Sarah Thornton.
I want us to solve more burglaries and bear down on violence before we make records of incidents that are not crimes. And I hope the Law Commission's review on hate crime takes account of the pressure on forces before suggesting that the law is changed. Historic investigations are another example of issues that matter very much to some, but undoubtedly take resources away from dealing with today's crime today.
Yeah, I'm very annoyed that they are bracketing together gender-based hate incidents, which is a nonsense, and political correct complaints, which is a nonsense. I would agree police shouldn't be wasting their time investigating such folly. But there's a good reason for investigating complaints against dead people, particularly high-profile dead people. I would argue, right? You might disagree with me. And campaigners for justice for child abuse victims and those who want to investigate historic child abuse are alarmed at what she said today. And maybe they have good reason to be alarmed. Because investigating Jimmy Savile, record-breaking paedophile, actually threw up loads of information related to abusers who are alive and well today. And I'm sure the Wiltshire Police Operation Conifer investigation into former UK Prime Minister Edward Heath also threw up links to people who are not dead, but who may have been complicit in kidnapping, raping and murdering children. This is sinister. Very sinister. Why would they do that? Say the police are horribly stretched. Yes, they are. The police is underfunded. Yes, it is. Because they are destroying it to pave the way for privatisation of it. We know this. Of course police officers are stretched. This is why burglaries are not investigated. This is why the conviction rates are at an all-time low. Of course. But for them to lump in people ringing up saying, that guy is homophobic, he said that he doesn't believe in gay marriage, that's a hate crime. For her to say that that's ridiculous and a waste of police time, which it is, and also investigating crimes, alleged crimes of dead people, I'm not happy with that. So Sir Peter Fahey is the former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, and he spoke with Sky News Kay Burley this afternoon. Use public inquiries for claims against dead people, he says, not the police. Peter Fahey.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jimmy Savile was a particularly serious case, and a lot of that investigation was looking at the failures of the organisation, the BBC. So often in those cases, lessons need to be learned. But that can be done by a form of public inquiry or other investigation. The problem with a criminal investigation is you're taking it down a particular route, and often the only outcome, if the suspect is dead, is a police statement which says that if the person had been living, a file would have been put forward to the the Crown Prosecution Service. So I think what Sarah Thornton is saying, that in those cases there needs to be a different approach. And certainly, for instance, the current national investigation inquiry into child abuse is probably a better route to examine this in detail, and particularly to make sure that the victims do get their experience recognised and that, the organisations are learning lessons.
No, that is nonsense. He said all that can come out of an investigation into a historical figure is a statement from the police at the end, something like, if the person was alive, there would be sufficient grounds to arrest him or her or interview him. That's all he said. That's bullshit, because many of these people had acquaintances, had people who helped them, people who were complicit, and some of these people are alive and well. Right. Now, to be fair to the much maligned, before we get to that, you see, Alexis J is the head of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse. She can't do what he said there. She can't follow the yellow brick road to investigate the known living acquaintances of dead child abuse. She can't do that, but the police can. And the much maligned Kay Burley often has the piss ripped out of her on this programme. To her credit, makes this point when she asks her next question of Sir Peter Fahey. Kay Burley.
But Sir Peter, did it not in turn shine a light into dark, murky corners that exposed other paedophiles that have since found themselves in jail as a direct result of investigating somebody like Jimmy Savile?
Yes, I mean, that can be the case, but, the police have to look at each investigation and absolutely assess it as to how serious is this. And as I say, I'm not sure we're getting, policing is getting across to the public how serious the situation is. I think, certainly I find here in Manchester, when I talk to lots of people, they are very concerned about an increase in burglaries in their area. They're not happy with some of the responses they're getting from the police at the moment. And that is because the police are so overwhelmed, with other calls.
They're overwhelmed with other calls. You see what he did there? He ignored her question. He waffled and then said people are more worried about burglaries. People have every right to be worried about burglaries. And they have every right to be worried about the lack of manpower or woman power in the police forces of the country to be able to properly investigate burglaries and bring the grubby bastards to justice. People are right to be worried about that. But you can't use that as an excuse to foist or kind of pawn off investigations into paedophilia and historic paedophilia onto a public inquiry, which doesn't have much by way of teeth, is what I would argue. Right? Yeah. And as for what I would do, the police obviously should be properly funded, should be. And if they were, they could have a department of detectives, men and women who could, I don't know, maybe I'm watching too much TV, go after allegations against dead, powerful people to see what it uncovers in terms of where it leads to people who are still alive and eminently prosecutable, right? Right. As for the misogyny stuff and transphobia and homophobia and all that crap, that waste of police time, you know, hating women, hating gay men and women, hating blacks, whites, Christians, Latinos, Muslims can't be a hate crime ever. Can't be. Thought crimes, like it or lump it, suck it up. It can't be a crime. They're idiots, but you have to live with them. I've said it a million times. Now, Adam Bolton, I mightn't, if I got the clip, I might not have the clip, which annoys me now. Have I got the clip? Have I? I have the clip. Thought for a minute I hadn't uploaded the clip into my playout system. Adam Bolton of Sky News asked Baroness Neville Jones about this, about prioritising complaints about political correctness and hate speech and all of that. And Baroness Neville Jones gives an answer that is pure common sense.
Now, what about this suggestion from a police chief that actually, at the ordinary level that most people encounter crime, basically we got too politically correct. We're looking into historic sex crimes and hate crimes where actually should be burglary and violence.
I'm entirely with her. I'm entirely with her. And I think actually a very large chunk of the British public will be entirely with her.
I mean, do you think we have got the emphasis wrong in
yes,
policing
I
at the moment?
I do. I mean, if you give your police more resources than they have and you have more policemen, you can do all these things. Though I have some reservations about the extent to which we should go around policing, you know, misogyny and behaviour. You know, behaviour.
But as a woman, you say that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there are certain things, you know, in an equal opportunity society that we can take care of ourselves. Now that's. You know, you may say, well, but you know, life is tough, and life is tough for some women. I don't disagree with that, but I do think that we need to know where to stop, and where the line lies between what people ought to be able to do for themselves and what society is going to busybody in. Yes, I think we are.
Been on burglary and violence.
Yes, I do, and I also think that if you've got to choose between priorities, I think things that result in violence and things that result in people losing their livelihoods and things, they do rank, and we do know that increasingly the police are not doing anything about theft.
Good stuff from Baroness Neville Jones. We'll leave that there. Just before we move on, left-wing alleged journalist and reporter Kevin Maguire tweeted out today about vaccinations and about the MMR jab. It's the anniversary today, I think, of the launch of the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. I think it might be the 30th anniversary or something along those lines. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I noticed this morning that he tweeted where he called those parents who haven't vaccinated their children, he called them child abusers. And I was going to get into this right now, not right now, but in the monologue, but I don't have time. So I'm going to do a programme tomorrow, and I've invited a wonderful woman called Ghislaine Langto, who wrote The Medical Mafia, former GP, is going to come on with me tomorrow at lunchtime, live. Don't worry if you can't make it. It'll be online very soon afterwards to talk about this. He tweeted today, this guy, Kevin Maguire, who's often found reviewing the newspapers on Sky News. He said, child abuse by parents failing to give their kids the MMR, mumps, measles, rubella vaccine. Make it compulsory in schools to bypass the confused, ignorant, lazy or stupid internet myth believers. These are dangerous times. I'm not going to labour the point. And that's a very big thing. And he's not alone today in terms of, Twitter users who are well known because of their work for various media organisations, demonising the parents who have opted out of vaccination and calling them child abusers. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. I'm going to do a live programme at 1 p.m. UK time tomorrow, Friday. That's 1 p.m, where I'll be joined by former doctor, wonderful writer, Ghislaine Langto, who will be live from Quebec in Canada. In the meantime, quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the Waco siege of 1993, David Koresh, Branch Davidians, what really happened there. We've got the world's most verifiable authority on the subject, the academic, lecturer, author and journalist Dick J. Reavis joins the programme. Later on in the show for Thursday show, November 1st, I'll be joined by Anti Fracking activist Frances Leader. I can't wait to meet her either. Back in 60 seconds then.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
And you're very welcome back to Thursday's programme. Thank you for the tweets. Lots of tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. That's where to find me. Right, to our first guest today then. This is very serious and very important stuff. The BBC are advertising all week long the launch of a new podcast series entitled End of Days. And the series looks at the events in Waco, Texas back in 1993, the famous Waco siege, which involved the Branch Davidian. They're often called cult members. David Koresh, the leader of that group, of course, and 80 people, I think, or more than 80 people in total died in that siege when the government, in the guise of the FBI and the ATF, basically raided the buildings there. It was a terrible thing at the time, and it was covered by the world's media. Even then, before the advent of 24/7 rolling news coverage, it was absolutely everywhere. But the BBC seems to be sticking to, I suppose, the Wikipedia version of what happened at Waco. And it's been alleged, it's been said, that in fact that they are willfully ignoring facts about what happened there. They are they are falling back on old debunked claims about child abuse and about people being held there against their will. There was only one man to contact, and I'm thrilled that he's agreed to come on the programme. He's a reporter, a journalist, a teacher, and he's written several best-selling books on many subjects, including the definitive book on this particular subject. I'll tweet out a link to that in a minute. It's called The Ashes of Waco, an Investigation. And would you believe he also testified before Congress about what happened at Waco as well. We're delighted that he's agreed to come on the programme today. Let's welcome to the show Mr. Dick J. Reavis. Dick, thanks so much for your time, sir. How are you? Are you there? We might have lost Dick momentarily. Can you hear us, Dick? Right, it's a really bad line. So the thing to do there is to hang up and dial him again. I know we're in 2018, but sometimes the old technology, it does drive you mad. Let's see, is he there this time around? Let's see if we got Dick on the line.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming on, and sorry about the temporary difficulty with the line there. I don't know what happened, but we're back, Dick, and we're live. Thanks for doing it. It's really important, I think. Dick, first question. Has the BBC been in touch with your good self in terms of doing some research for their podcast series. Have they been in touch with you?
No.
Isn't that a surprise?
Sir?
Isn't that a surprise?
Who knows?
I mean, I introduced you as a verifiable expert on all things Waco. Your book, The Ashes of Waco, which I read many years ago, is the definitive version, the definitive account of what happened, Dick. Let me ask you then, with the BBC making this programme and claiming that Koresh was basically a madman, that people were being held there against their will, the child abuse was taking place daily, I was under the impression, Dick, that this had been debunked by people like yourself many years ago. Is that right?
Yes, my book has become roughly the primer on this question. And over the years, the consensus of the country has agreed with it. Meaning it's now completely, it's authoritative.
So tell me why then, when I go out and about like everybody else and I bump into people who know of this radio show, and today I was saying to people, you've got to listen to the programme today. I've got a great guy from Texas coming on called Dick Reavis. He's written this book about Waco. He's testified before Congress. And I asked people today, what does David Koresh mean to you? And Dick, they said almost unanimously, well, he's the crazy cult leader that kidnapped all those people and had sex with all of those children. Why do you think that is, that image of Koresh has endured despite the work of you and others 25 years ago?
I think it's true that he did have sex with underage women. The rest of it is just prejudice.
Why prejudice, Dick?
Well, the problem I ran into is that Koresh and them had a fairly esoteric but traditional interpretation of the scriptures. And when you deal with, especially with Protestants, they all think they know what the Bible says. And so Koresh was wrong. And I can't say that Koresh was right or wrong, but he was speaking from, he knew the Bible, and they didn't. They don't. Your average Protestant sort of invents his own religion and puts parameters around what he thinks the Bible should say or shouldn't say. And Koresh tied together scriptures that justified what he said. We could also come up with theologies that didn't justify what he said, but at least he knew from what book he was talking.
When it was claimed, I mean, again, today the official account of what happened is that the ATF and the government, let's be honest, moved in on the Branch Davidians because they believed that he was stockpiling weapons and that he was dangerous and that the group might be dangerous and they might be a threat to local security. Is there any truth in that, Dick, looking back? I mean, again, the BBC running their podcast series, and it's going to be heard by a lot of people, are running this story that this guy was crazy, he was a pedophile, and he was a gun nut, and he was definitely a danger to the local community. Tell us about that, and tell us about what you found when you investigated that.
I don't think anyone who knew him in Waco would say he was a threat to the local community. The sheriff and his deputies used to go fishing in a pond at Mount Carmel, and they had dealt with David for years and didn't feel he was any kind of a threat. He was eccentric, maybe. He was a gun nut, maybe. But he wasn't, wasn't a threat. That's nonsense.
He was incredibly charismatic, wasn't he, Dick?
They say he was. I never knew him in life.
And you knew, you watched this unfold on television like everybody else. How shocking was it then, Dick? And looking back on it now, is it still as shocking today to see the footage of agents crawling around on the roof and the building catching fire? It must have been pretty awful to watch. I mean, I can barely remember it, but it must have been a pretty difficult thing to watch back then. Looking back on it now, is it still as shocking?
It was an abuse of police power. I have to say that I wasn't particularly shocked and really didn't take much interest in the subject until after it was all over, when I was able to talk to some of the people who had been inside. But it was very clearly an abuse of police power.
Why did they do it, Dick? I know it's a complex question. Why did they go in there? If this man was leading, if he was eccentric and if he was being followed by eccentric people, but if it was harmless, why did they go to such extraordinary measures and, kill so many people?
What we think comes from the circumstances that the ATF faced. It was being sued both by its female and its black employees for discrimination. And so the ATF thought it had a group of white Christian fundamentalists who had guns. And it thought that if it went before the Congress, which was Democratic, that would help it boost its budget. Whereas the lawsuits by the blacks and the females were a peril to its budget. So in other words, to look better before the Democratic Congress, they pulled this raid.
Do you think... Sorry, Dick, to interrupt.
It was popular.
It was popular. It was popular amongst the hierarchy of the ATF. Do you think they had any idea of the catastrophe that would unfold, that, upwards of 80 people would be killed? Did they expect that? Was that something they...
No, this was their chief era. The ATF was accustomed to raiding drug dealers, raiding the houses of drug dealers. And when you do that, you circle the house, you say, "We're here to arrest you." The drug dealer picks up his cell phone, calls his lawyer, and his lawyer says, "Surrender, I'll get you out this afternoon."
Yeah.
So they pulled that on Mount Carmel because they didn't know what the people in Mount Carmel believed. Had they known, they never would have done what they did. They could have known, but they all assumed, they're just a Christian cult. We're Christians. We know how to deal with them.
Is it true, Dick, that because everybody focuses on the horrors of the raid, and again, I'm not paying lip service to it. It's horrific when you look back at the footage even now. We focus on that, but there was a lot of time leading up to that. And is it true that the ATF and other government agents were basically torturing the people inside using sound technology and other kind of harassment weapons? Is that right?
Once the siege began, certainly with the broadcasts they made into, how do you say, in the environment, they were trying to torture them. And they justified this as psychological warfare, blasting music and the sounds of animals being killed into Mount Carmel at night. They said it was psychological warfare. But if you go look at the history of blasting sounds that way, they were begun when Noriega, the Panamanian dictator, when the United States surrounded him and reporters got listening equipment to hear what was being said between them and Noriega's negotiators. That's when they started using music to interfere with the press. The ATF called that psychological warfare.
That's incredible, isn't it? And there are those who maintain that various forms of new sonic, well, it would have been new at the time, but prototype devices were used on those people in there, even though, Dick, there were so many children in there. It's almost unthinkable, isn't it?
They were completely oblivious to the needs of the children. They tear gassed the place, and there are no gas masks for children. The adults had them, but they showed an indifference to the welfare of the people inside.
Dick, we've got a lot of listeners, and we're getting a lot of interaction here on social media, on Twitter. Thanks for being with us, by the way. Dick is going to stay with me for another 15 minutes or thereabouts. Thanks for your time, Dick. I know you're a busy man. I really appreciate this. If you haven't read any of Dick's books, check them out. You've got to read The Ashes of Waco, an Investigation. It is, as Dick himself said, and it is the authoritative account of what happened there. I read the book about 15 years ago when I first got into it. Would you believe, Dick, I interviewed Randy Weaver some years ago, and he was telling me about you and your book. And it's an amazing thing that we haven't spoken before, but there you are. You can find that at Amazon.com, all good retailers. Dick is an academic, he's a teacher, a journalist, and it's great to have him on the programme. Lots of comments on social media. Is there a relationship, Dick, between what happened to the Weaver family in Idaho the previous year? Is there a relationship between that and what happened at Waco? Just to remind our listeners, Randy Weaver and his wife Vicky and their children went to live in a cabin in a mountain after the government tried to entrap Randy over a sawn-off shotgun. He said no way. Went to their cabin and were followed up there by, I suppose, many of the same actors that we would see at Waco a year later. Vicky was shot dead while holding her child. Randy's son was murdered. Is there a relationship between what happened there and Waco, Dick?
Sure. They're both instances of federal overreach, law enforcement overreach. And those two incidents together gave rise to a big gun rights movement, because our Constitution says you can own firearms. And the gun rights people thought, here comes what we call the big gun grab, the federal government trying to take away everybody's guns. And which might be a good idea, but it's not constitutional, and it's not legal. And time and again, they stepped on the First Amendment, which gives you free speech, and the Second Amendment, which says you can own firearms.
It's interesting that you said there, especially a man from the South, Dick. It's interesting you said it might be a good idea to disarm people with guns, or maybe people maybe on the far right with guns. However, isn't what happened at Ruby Ridge and what happened at Waco, isn't it a great illustration of what the government can do to anybody? And doesn't it justify people's desire to own their weapons, lest that sort of thing happen to them?
Well, people own weapons because they're afraid of the government. And among our people, black people own weapons because they're afraid of the Ku Klux Klan. And historically, I think both of those fears have been justified.
Yeah, I hear you. And obviously gun control is very, very topical at the moment because of various shootings, what we saw in Pittsburgh, and I understand that. There are people, Dick, who are a bit more moderate, though, and they ultimately believe that the government or the establishment doesn't want people to go it alone. And what we saw with the Weavers and what we saw with the Branch Davidians was people who wanted to live their own lives their own way, and that maybe the government doesn't want people doing that, and this is why we saw the violence then. Do you have any sympathy with that position, with that point of view?
Yes, but I don't think that the government is, that conscious to where it's a policy. What happens is that the people who have this power get in jams, as the ATF did, but with the lawsuits from the blacks and the women. And they then turn to doing prejudiced things. in order to improve their image or improve their popularity. And I think you will see some of the same thing going on today with Trump's plans to send military to stop the Honduran caravan, is that when you're in trouble, you think if you send the Army or the FBI and use guns, you can become popular. Another example would be the American invasion of Iraq. Saddam Hussein supposedly had prohibited weapons, as David Koresh supposedly have. So the answer is send in the troops. And our government tends to shoot before it negotiates, not because, it is consciously tyrannical, but because right now Donald Trump is down in the polls, and at the time of the Waco incident, the ATF was in trouble with Congress.
I really respect that opinion, Dick, and I'm not buttering you up, but I'm not sure I go along with it. Because okay. I not only because I do see evidence of, a kind of a systemic plan to force people into compliance and to go after individuals who want to extricate themselves away from the hand of the totalitarian government. It doesn't mean I'm right. It's just how I see it. I think you're spot on in your analysis of what Trump is doing. And I do believe the United States Constitution is very explicit when it talks about, is it the Posse Comitatus Act, where the military shall not be used to provide public law enforcement. I worry that with the caravan response and other things, that somebody, maybe a devious man with a plan, wants to get people accustomed to seeing the army on the streets doing basic policing. Am I being a bit paranoid, Dick? What do you think?
I think yes, but they can only get that consent from the populace when they're attacking groups against which there's prejudice. For example, during the riots we had in the 60s in the African American ghettos, they sent in the troops.
Yeah.
It's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, right?
Yeah.
They've been doing it for years with anybody who, doesn't meet their standards of respectability, which largely come from prejudice.
Yeah, which is tyranny, Dick. That's a tyrannical outlook, isn't it?
Yes, but the problem is all governments try to suppress their opposition. So
yeah,
you could make the same critique of practically all governments.
I think the world, and again, I'm not buttering you up, I think it owes you a debt of gratitude for the work that you've done on what happened at Waco and what happened to those people who never deserved that. I think you demonstrated, beyond any reasonable doubt through your work and investigations that these people were not a threat to anybody. I suppose the $64 million question is, Dick, were those responsible? I know in the case of Waco, I know the answer. I know it's difficult. It's different with Ruby Ridge. There was some compensation for Randy Weaver. But were people sufficiently punished or chastised to prevent something like Waco happening again in the future? Could it happen again, Dick?
No one was punished at Waco.
No one, yeah. Nobody was punished. Yeah, that's right. I was alluding to that. With respect to Ruby Ridge, there were penalties and there were fines and
no, there was no settlement paid. The followers of Koresh sued the government for wrongful death, and their case got defeated in court. Got defeated before judges.
Meaning that it could very likely, there is a likelihood that it could happen again. And with the current climate, Dick, with a lot of Trump supporters having complete, having no faith in the institutions of government, having no faith in maybe society, do you think it's something that might happen again in the future?
It how do you say, if opposition rises, the government will try to suppress it. Look at McCarthyism.
Yeah. Where do you see McCarthyism today, Dick? Where does it manifest itself today in public life?
I think it's probably, I don't know firsthand, but I think it's probably shifted to the Muslim population. Meaning that's who the FBI is surveilling and harassing these days.
You think that Muslims have maybe Islam has replaced communism, Dick, as a stick?
That seems to be the case.
That being said, now, I love an argument, Dick, and it's great to have you on the programme. And listen, I go along with that, by the way. That being said, you know, there are people in the United Kingdom listening to this tonight with great interest. And they're tweeting us, massive tweets coming in there. They will say, yes, Islamophobia and blaming Muslims for everything is dangerous and is wrong, but unfettered immigration has driven down wages and has made it more difficult for people to find jobs that pay the bills. Do you have sympathy with those people? They're not all racist.
I have sympathy with those people, but I think they're missing a point. The economies of most countries are now geared so that capital, investment money, can cross borders. If capital can cross, why can't labor? And there's the problem.
Yeah, because there is an answer to that, Dick. There is an answer. The answer is that the owners of companies and corporations, they've used the migrant workforce to work cheaper and for lesser working conditions. And in towns and cities, haven't they? So it's a $64 million question, so what do you do? I don't believe Donald Trump. I despise Trump and everything he stands for. I don't believe that he wants to protect American jobs no more than I believed him when he said that he would end interventionism. So what do? You know, if you've got a migrant workforce making things more difficult for an indigenous workforce, what do? If you were to be made king and, you know, Lord and Master tomorrow morning, what would we do, Dick?
I would get control of the 1%.
Right. Well,
right. They have to be subject to restrictions as well. And if that were to happen, we would have a lot less problems on every front. But as things stand, those people are running practically every country in the world, and the people are paying the price.
That's right. And when you and I go to the ballot box, we end up voting for a choice of two puppets. I've always believed that, and I always will. That's just my opinion. Just before you go, Dick, again, yeah, I mean, you've proven yourself to be a sound and terrific and ethical journalist through the course of your career. Tell me about the health of journalism in the United States and around the world in 2018. Where is journalism today, Dick?
I can only tell you about the United States, and the status is that since 2000, 60% of the reporters have been laid off. So we're doing less journalism, and that's a danger. We need to be doing more because the world is more complex every day. The other thing is that during the 80s, largely in response to All the President's Men movies, we got a new crew of journalists out of the best colleges in the country who got higher salaries in that time. And we developed a press which was no longer close to the common reader. And so it became an elite. So how do you say it? The Trump people say it's an elite. They're right.
Yeah, but the
Trump people say journalism is our enemy. They're wrong.
It's just we don't have it, yeah. We've seen with the Comcast takeover of Sky, and we've seen plurality disappear in this country, Dick. Local newspapers are going out of publication. at least 2 a week. Local radio stations are being bought up by conglomerates. It really is. It's a desperate time for free speech and for independent journalism.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. The shuttering of newspapers and the consolidation of all the media. And the product of the consolidated mediums is inferior.
Dick, I want to thank you for giving us your time today, talking about Waco there, your time investigating that and segueing then into talking about politics today and free speech. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Dick. Folks, you've heard Dick Reavis there. If you haven't read his books, I can't recommend them enough, particularly The Ashes of Waco, an investigation if you want to know what the government did through the ATF, of course, and the FBI, what they did to those people in Waco and Mount Carmel. Dick, sincere thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Look after yourself. Bye for now. Dick Reavis joining us live there from his home in Texas. The man who testified before Congress. The man who basically broke the real story of what happened at Waco and debunked all the lies and the mythologies that had been spread, of course, through the corporate media by the ATF and those government agencies to convince the world that David Koresh was a madman, that he was a threat to local security, that he would kill people, that they were stockpiling weapons, that children were being raped and all the rest of it. Of course, much, or not all of it, but much of that was proven through the work of Dick Reavis mainly and others to be complete nonsense. So that BBC podcast that's going out, and it is interesting because they've interviewed people who lived in Cheetham Hill, Manchester, of course, people who went from Manchester and from other parts of the country out to Texas to become a part of what David Koresh was building there. That in and of itself is very interesting. But the BBC is sticking to the old story, the old official story that I just outlined there. It's 4 minutes to the top of the hour. Thursday's Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio. We're on triggerwarning.tv as well as richieallen.co.uk. I will take a very quick break now. When we come back, more chat. And don't forget, we're going to speak with Frances Leader for the first time. She'll join me in around about 15 minutes time. Back in a couple of minutes.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Yeah, lots of comments on that. I have no doubt that much of what Dick was saying there is accurate. But when it comes down to why they did it, I firmly believe the reason they went up that mountain after the Weaver family a year earlier and murdered Vicky Weaver and Randy Weaver's son and had that siege there. And the reason for Waco was to send a message to people. You know, we own you and you live by the rules that we've laid down. You don't extricate yourself from it. You don't go living, off by yourself on land that you own. You don't form your own community. You don't tell us that you reject our laws because we'll kill you if you do that. I have no doubt there's a lot to be said for that. And I interviewed Randy Weaver many, many years ago. I've lost touch with Randy Weaver. I know he still occasionally does say it for me, Randy. Occasionally does talks, and I think he does the occasional radio interview, but he's not so much of a public figure as he used to be. Right, it's 90 seconds to the top of the hour. Faisal tweets, talking of BBC lies and half-truths, their House of Saud series has been interesting to watch. I've not watched it, Faisal. I've not had the time, but I'm very much interested in it. No doubt about that. Hi to Nick Molyneux as well, to Mwinga and to Rob Allen. Good interview, says Rob. But I've had a tweet from Cave Hillbilly who says, nice padding, Richie. Blood from a stone springs to mind. I didn't get that from Dick. I enjoyed speaking with him, and I thought he had a lot of very interesting things to say. So there you are. Right, going to take some music now for a change. Mentioned yesterday, I'm trying to what's the word I'm looking for? What's the adjective? What's the verb? I'm trying to kind of ease music out of the show for editing reasons, really. When I come to edit the program to put it on YouTube, it's much more helpful when there isn't much music or any music, only maybe a song at the end. Because of course YouTube, if there is music in it, it immediately embargoes the upload and people in certain parts of the world can't hear it. But anyway, we've got to have some music now. And we're going to be talking fracking. Frances Leader contacted this program to say that she's interested in our coverage of fracking, but she believes that there are areas of fracking and there are things happening that maybe we don't know about. So she joins me in a few minutes. Yeah, the unmistakable sound of Clarence Clements on the saxophone there. Bruce Springsteen, This Life from Working on a Dream. On the Richie Allen Show, Europe's most listened to independent radio show, live right now on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, richieallen.co.uk, and the Cogent Radio app. You can download the Cogent Radio app if you like. Thanks to Hayden Hugh, it's a terrific app. There's nothing on it that you wouldn't like. There's no grabbing your data or stealing your info or none of that. It's a good app. If you have a smart device, it's a good app. All right, it's a good app. Right, Frances Leader in a couple of minutes. Let's head over to FSN though. Let's head over to I can't even say it, FSN, to get the headlines this hour. 30 seconds. Give me 30 seconds and I'll give you the world.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. Google employees at several global locations have been taking part in a walkout over the treatment of women at the company. Pollution levels in India's capital have crossed 7 times the permissible limit, leading to a 10-day-long emergency plan. UK police are investigating one of the key figures in the country's Brexit campaign over alleged offences in the EU referendum, and the EU's chief Brexit negotiator says a deal regarding financial services has not been reached.
Thank you very much, Ollie Barrett. How kind of you.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Yeah, that Google it's called, not Google, I've been told many times. That Google staff walkout was very interesting today. There was great comedy on Sky News this morning. One of their reporters went to Google's office in London and spoke to some of the people who had walked out, and some of the interviews were hilarious because some of the people were a bit embarrassed and a bit sheepish and they didn't know what was going on. So they just mumbled, yeah, I'm against harassment. That's why I'm here. I'm against harassment. So that's it, an unprecedented series of walkouts because of Google's treatment of women. I did notice today that in some cases Google has been accused of paying its female staff 83% less than their male counterparts. I found that quite incredible because I would have thought that a job would have been advertised with a set salary. I would have presumed or assumed, making an ass out of you and out of me, that they advertise a job and say this is the salary, 20 grand, 23 grand, 25 grand per annum. So how could there be such disparity? And then I began to think, do they put these jobs out and advertise them and then they interview people and the salary then becomes negotiable? Is that what happens? I don't know. Now, if that is the case, by the way, and I find that very interesting, I'm channeling my inner Kevin Myers, great Irish journalist who was fired from the Sunday Times, of course, last year because he made a quip about Jewish female presenters at the BBC not being stupid when it came to negotiating their salaries. He was talking about Claudia Winkleman and Vanessa Feltz, and he got into trouble for complimenting them, ultimately. Talked a lot about that last year. So is that true? Is that what's going on? The jobs are put out there, candidates come, and then they negotiate their salaries. I don't know. Because I find it hard to believe they can get away with paying a man and a woman so much of a different salary for the same job. Anyway, look, what am I about? There you go. Loads of interesting things. There's also a big story about fertility today, male fertility. Now, if you've just joined the programme, I will be live tomorrow. That's tomorrow at 1 p.m. UK time, where I'll be joined by Ghislaine Langto of the medical mafia fame, former doctor. She's going to be talking to me tomorrow, and we'll be talking about calls to equate people who exempt their children from vaccines, to equate them with child abuse. But we'll also be talking about male fertility. Ghislaine Langto joins your Richie Allen Show for a special Friday edition, a one-off edition, tomorrow at 1 p.m. How about it, eh?
Richie Allen.
Yeah. Right, we're coming up for 10 minutes past the hour, so I better get my next guest on the old dog and the old bone. How about it, eh? By the way, you can tweet me. Keep the tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. And this phone system is annoying the bejesus out of me. So it is. I'm trying to call my next guest and I'm being prevented from doing it. But, fear not, because I'm pretty sure I can do it while waffling away. It's unbelievable. Hang on there now. There you go. Yeah, I inputted all this information into the system earlier on. This is what I do, right? To make it easy for me. So that when I'm talking to you, I need only just lean over to my left and just press a button and then it rings. But it's not doing that. Maybe it'll do it now. I think it might be doing it now. Is it doing it now? I think it might be doing it now. Right, let's introduce my next guest then. As you know, this programme has talked a lot about fracking over the years, the dangers of it, the lunacy of it, the insanity of it, the possible real reasons for it in terms of poisoning the land, rendering it unusable and uninhabitable, Agenda 21, Agenda 30, all of that. And I've had some very interesting people on over the years, academics from Oklahoma talking about earthquakes. I've had activists on in this country. Vanessa Vine has been on over the years. I've had, of course, Tina Rothery on. And my next guest got in touch with me. And she is the admin of a group called Anti Fracking International. And she's been an activist around fracking and spent time at the Balcombe Protection Camp since 2013. And she emailed me saying that, first of all, thanking me for getting the anti-fracking message out there frequently, but she says that she's got more information to give me in this programme, information that hasn't been discussed so far. She also told me about her husband, who worked in oil and gas for many years, and she said he passed away, unfortunately, that he died of cancer. And she said something very interesting, as do many oil and gas field workers, she said, something I wasn't aware of. Let's welcome to the programme Frances Leader. Fran, welcome, how are you?
Hi Richie, thank you very much for getting in touch.
No, thank you for getting in touch. That's what the programme is here to do. When people like yourself get in touch and want to come on, I'm glad to hear from you. Frances, before we talk about areas surrounding fracking that I maybe haven't considered or explored, very interested in you talking about your husband, rest in peace, sincerely, who you said died of cancer, and you said many oil and gas field workers who working in that field do end up getting or dying of cancer. That's of great interest to me. Tell me more about that.
My husband worked for BP in the North Sea on an oil rig. He was paid very well, and part of the salary he got was designated danger money, and we assumed that figure was to account for the fact that he was working in the high seas and within the Arctic Circle at times, and it's a dangerous, extremely dangerous job. So that's what we assumed at the time. And shortly after he left that job, he started to get very ill, and it took 30 years for it to actually kill him. He was ill for 30 years. Well, obviously he had plenty of friends that he had worked with, and for a short while we had lived in Aberdeen and had made a lot of friends in the area. And it started to become the conversation piece. Everybody was talking about the fact that they had cancer. Different friends went down at different times and at different rates, depending on their own physical strengths, I suppose. And it struck us all that this was too much of a coincidence. And my husband was the kind of guy that was a hands-on man and wasn't interested in paperwork. And so I did all his paperwork for him. And one of the things that I used to notice about BP was they sent us absolutely reams of paperwork. Every week I was getting memos and information, and I read every bit of it. And, so that I could convey to him anything that was really important. Never at any point was there ever anything said about the fact that the oil rigs were radioactive. That as soon as you start circulating the drilling muds back up onto the platform, they are loaded with norms, naturally occurring radioactive materials, and radon. In many cases, when they're doing fracking, they're using perforation guns to perforate the part of the well that is running horizontal in the shale play. And in order to burst through the pipe enough to create a space for the fluid to pass through, they're using Halliburton depleted uranium perforation guns. This is never mentioned, never. They just say, whenever you hear about fracking, they talk about we pump all this water through, and they don't mention that how is this water going to get through the pipe if the pipe is not perforated first? They cover this up. So what is returning back to the rig is not only loaded with norms and radon from deep underground, but it's also loaded with depleted uranium from the charges that are used to burst through the pipe.
And the workers are exposed to that, and your husband and many of the people who worked with him developed tumours or cancers. Did anybody ever look into that, Francis? Was there ever any outcry? Did anybody ever demand an investigation? Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. When we contacted BP to make this claim, we were told, as were many people, that oil rig workers earn a great deal of money, and as a result of which they have a very hedonistic lifestyle, and that's what killed them.
Oh, wow.
So I immediately responded to that saying, just a minute, my husband had friends outside of the oil and gas industry, and they were just as hedonistic as my husband. And not one of them has gone down with cancer. Most of them worked in construction. In fact, my husband, when he wasn't on the rig, was working in construction. So we hit this brick wall. So I got in touch with some people in the States called the gas vets, guys that have worked on gas fields, and asked, is this true for you? And yes, it is. So I got in touch with people that work in Australia. Same thing came back to me. And what makes me really, really angry is now when I see images of guys working on rigs, on land or offshore, they're still wearing the same kit that my husband wore. Rig boots, overalls, hard hat, gloves, and no protection whatsoever.
That's not protecting them at all, Francis. It's
no.
Not. Wow, that's
There's
an
no
amazing
way
thing.
that they can. And they don't tell them. That is the most heartbreaking thing, is my husband did not know, and I did not know. And the guilt I suffer from the whole of my life now, is the fact that I persuaded him to go and work on the oil rigs in 1974 when we went through that awful downturn of finance because of the lorry strikes. We weren't getting any equipment for the roofs that we were doing. We had a roofing business. And just to get us through that, I said to him, why don't you go and work on the oil rigs? And he did. And so it's my fault he went.
No, it's not your fault. Look, men and women, we'll do anything to put food on the table and pay our bills. It's not your fault. Anybody would have done it, and the money was good, and it's still very good, Francis. When my partner Caroline and I lived in Spain, Caroline ran a bar, and would you believe there was a big rig that was built just off the coast of Gibraltar, and there were loads of men. Yeah. There were loads of men working on that, and then it was moved off to Texas, and they were over in Texas, and they were working on it. And just thinking of what you're saying now, these men must be exposed to chemicals and to radiation that maybe, again, they're not aware of.
They're definitely not. There was never anything in all that paperwork that I saw, never a word about radiation, and certainly no breakdown of the drilling muds, no chemical breakdown. Now, this is just conventional wells I'm talking about. Fracking is far, far worse. And the reason it's far, far worse is because it was invented in 1963 for the purpose of disposing of nuclear waste from the nuclear energy.
Now listen to this. This is important. I'm not going to be stopping you and interrupting you, but I just want to get this clear. This is an important fact. You're telling me that the methodology by which fracking is carried out was actually originally invented as a means of disposing nuclear materials.
That's right. And I can prove this, and have done continuously on Anti Fracking International. I have clippings from old newspapers from 1963 celebrating the fact that they've discovered this new thing called fracking, which is specifically for disposing of liquid radioactive wastes. I've shared these images of these cuts from the newspaper several times, and really only now starting to get traction with people actually sitting up and taking notice of what I'm saying.
It's very important that you're saying this. I'm going to be totally honest now. This is new to me, a lot of this, as you said it would be. And,
I'm sorry.
You did say that. So I'm not trying to cover myself. I'm just saying this is new to me. I can't dispute what Francis is saying. I know the average man and woman, the average Joe and Josephine, they've been told by UK media, US media, they've been given a fairly basic description of what fracking is. They are told that there is natural gas contained within shale rock underneath the ground, and that hydraulic fracturing is a way to extract it, and that it's all sound and it's all lovely, and we can blast the shale with this water to extract the gas, and it'll bring jobs and all of this. This is what people are told. I don't believe any of that. I believe that it's deadly dangerous, but I didn't realise this depleted uranium nuclear waste angle. I didn't know anything about that, and I want you to reiterate what you said to us already, that perforation guns are used for not only for fracking, but also in exploration kind of endeavours, to explore where there might be gas in the shale. These perforation guns use depleted uranium. And explain again to us, in terms that we can understand, what do these guns do in the fracking process? Okay.
In fracking, what they do is drill straight down and then go horizontal in the layer of shale for, in many cases, up to a mile. When they feel they have got an adequate section of the shale rock accessed, they then send down charges down into the end of the pipe, and those charges blast small holes through the pipe all the way along. Now, in order to do that, we're talking about really, really solid pipe, steel pipe. In order to do that, they have to use a Halliburton depleted uranium patented charge. Now, they never admit to this. Never.
They won't acknowledge this. So Claire Perry, this energy minister who's never been to Little Plumpton, amazingly, in the northwest, and Michael Gove. They just don't know anything. They have no idea this is going on.
I wouldn't know if they know or not. I wouldn't like to say that they do or don't.
And you know,
because,
you and I, Francis. Go on. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Richie, I've spent 7 years now researching this. You can imagine. After my husband died, and I just devote my entire day and night, 7 days a week, to researching this. And believe me, I would not come onto your show and tell you something that was wrong.
Oh no, I'm absolutely sure that you believe this. I have no doubt that you do. Now tell me, how does somebody like you, obviously you're smart, Francis, you're very articulate, you're a good writer. I've been reading some of the stuff that you've been posting. It's very articulate, it's very easy to understand. How do you find this sort of stuff out about depleted uranium? Is it whistleblowers? Is it people tipping you off?
Yes, for the most part, the gas vets in America and Loxagate organisation in Australia have been absolutely vital, passing the information. And besides that, my son is particularly good on research as well, and it was him that found the Halliburton patent for the perforation guns. And so, you know, it's a family effort we're putting in here.
You know something, Francis? If people want to know anything about depleted uranium, they need only go online and read the articles by Robert Fisk and read about Chris Busby and what the depleted uranium munitions did to the people of Fallujah in Iraq.
Exactly.
You know, that's a story I covered years ago when I was based in Spain. I know you've been based in Spain yourself. You've spent your time in Spain. In Madrid, I think you spent time. That was me voyeuristically going through your life today, trying to find out as much as I could about you. But depleted uranium is a terrible thing. So we've been spending a lot of time talking about earthquakes, and we've had so many seismic events in at Little Plumpton, of course, and it's caused the shutting down temporarily of quadrillis fracking there. But you're telling us today that earthquakes, bad enough as all that is, it's only the half of it when it comes to the damage that fracking could do.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that really grabs my heart is when I watch the live stream from Preston New Road and I see those guys coming out of the rig site, not washing the wheels of their cars, and knowing that they are radioactive and taking that home to their families, and that just does my head in.
It's unconscionable, really, when you think of it in those terms. I want to just go back to fracking technology originally used to bury nuclear waste. Have you put on your sites, Francis, have you put links to newspaper articles back in the 60s that demonstrate that the fracking techniques were originally designed for burying the nuclear materials? Is that all there for people to see?
Yes, it is. It's been shared, 143 times this most recent occasion that I've put it up. It is getting out. The information is getting out.
People should find Francis on Facebook, by the way. There's only one Francis Leader, Leader, and Anti Fracking International. And this is where you've shared the links to this information. Because listeners will say to me, you've got to challenge Francis on... Because this is obviously massively new for many people. The idea that the fracking techniques of today were actually designed as a means to bury stuff. But you know, it makes sense, Francis, doesn't it, when you think about it? It actually makes sense, doesn't it?
It makes more sense when you understand that the Infrastructure Act that the British government passed in 2015 had a clause tucked neatly into it which stated that they can leave any substance, and those are the exact words, any substance down a well. There's your clue that they do know what they're doing.
Wow. Where does the depleted uranium go, Francis?
Well, it's in the charges, and so they're like miniature bombs, and they blast through into the shale rock, through the pipe into the shale rock, and of course they are crucial in creating the cracks which the silicon or sand holds apart so that the gas can flow back into the well. But of course, all of that, the gas included, will be radioactive.
Yeah.
because the charges are.
That's the point I was making. It's not just a danger to the people on site. It's also going to get into the land, isn't it? And the water.
Absolutely. It's just mind-blowing that they would dare to keep such a secret. And the thing that really, really gets me is Preston New Road is a particularly interesting site to choose for their first frack, because it's only 8 miles away from a nuclear manufacturing works, Springfields. So they've got a disposal problem 8 miles away from Preston New Road. What does this tell you? The land is fractured so badly. Britain is fractured. It's, you know, it's not like the Marcellus Shale in America, one huge chunk of shale rock going across the land. It's not like that. It's fractured so much that bits are up and bits are down. So they're going to have to drill every few miles to just access the shale rock. And it will be just small pockets at a time. So those wells will be extracting the gas and depleting very fast. And then they'll cap them off, so they're saying.
It sounds like it's not financially feasible at all, Francis. And what I mean by that is it doesn't sound like a smart commercial or a clever commercial venture, because it looks like what they'll be able to get is not going to cover even the financial costs of doing what they're doing. Is that fair to say?
You're right, but apart from one thing, if they continue then thereafter to use that depleted well for the storage of nuclear waste materials, then those drilling companies, such as Quadrilla, are onto an earner for the rest of eternity, because they've got to be maintained and cared for.
And somebody will have to pay for it.
Absolutely. The British government pays for it. It's quite shocking, really.
It's shocking stuff. I'm just going to remind our listeners, it's 29 minutes past the hour. Francis Leader is live with me. Francis got in touch with the programme a couple of days back and asked to come on. You can find her at Anti Fracking International. You can find her on Facebook. She's on Twitter as well. I tweet out a link to where you can follow her on Twitter. Francis' husband was worked for BP in oil and gas, and it's through his experiences and him becoming unwell that she's begun to look into the methodology of extracting oil as well as gas, and now of course shale gas through fracking. And she's discovered some, pretty horrifying things. We've talked about how the method itself of fracking was actually designed for something entirely different, to bury deep underground the byproduct of, I suppose, nuclear energy, nuclear waste. She's talked about and it's very important, the links between Halliburton and fracking. Halliburton have designed and patented a perforation gun, which actually fires depleted uranium munitions, because depleted uranium munitions are better to pierce metal and pierce armour. And this is something we haven't considered and something we haven't discussed on this programme. It's mind-boggling stuff. We don't know whether the government is aware of this or not. Skeptics would say they probably are. What we do know, Francis, is that if this is all true, it's a life killer, isn't it? It's not only killing people, but it's going to kill the land. It's going to kill every animal on the land. It's going to kill every good bacteria in the land and in the soil. It's a kind of a death cult, this, isn't it?
It's quite shocking. If you, I don't know if Vanessa Vine or Tina Rothery have mentioned this site before, but you can get a site on the web called the List of the Harmed, and it started off in just Pennsylvania, but now it's got sections for every state that is affected in America, and the lists of livestock and pets and people affected by living in or near a gas or oil field is absolutely heartbreaking. You can't read past enough pages of it. It's thousands of entries.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned, I used the kind of sensational term death cult, and I deliberately used that term. I don't often use terms like that, because this is an inevitable consequence of fracking. So, therefore, there are researchers and conspiracy researchers and writers, some of whom have been called mad in the past, who believe that this might be an intended consequence of it. Make rural areas uninhabitable. Make coastal areas uninhabitable. It sounds like the stuff of James Bond villain movies and stuff, Francis, but they must know that this is going to happen, right?
Well, I think the way that the Infrastructure Act of 2015 that was written by the UK Tory government, if you read that, then you know that they know. They definitely know. Otherwise, why would they put in a clause saying you may leave any substance down a well? Any substance. You just, my red flags went up, and I was trying to tell people it was such hard work because, and I was trying to object to the Infrastructure Act. I even went to Parliament to speak to my MP and say, look, what is this? Why are you prepared to leave any substance down the well underneath people's homes? Because this is not America. We are very, very tightly populated here. You can't be doing this. And besides that, there's the subsidence problem. If you keep drilling every few miles and totally crack up the shale rock, then the rock above it is going to subside. And the rock above that, and the rock above that. Now, it may not affect us in this generation, but like the North American Indians, we have to think 7 generations ahead. We've got to think about our kids' kids and what they're going to be putting up with. And we've already seen massive sinkholes swallowing up lakes in America. We've already seen gas bubbling up through the Condamine in Australia.
Do you think the sinkholes are definitely related, Francis? Because I know there are people who would dispute that and say it's a different type of phenomenon, but you think it's related to the fracking?
I do, yes, because when I was back in the 70s, when my husband worked for BP, and we went to dinner dance things, and I was talking to one of his senior bosses on the dance floor of one of these dinner dance things, and I said to him, look, if you take all the gas out from underneath a dome of rock, because the gas is so under pressure, it causes the rock above it to form a dome. If you take that high pressure gas out, won't that dome collapse?
Yeah.
And he said, well, no, not really. We just fill it back up with water. I said, well, water's not the same pressure as gas.
No, it isn't.
And we're on the dance floor, right? And he just walked me back to my husband and said to my husband, lucky you, she's actually got a brain. And I thought, what a misogynist to assume that that was a rare thing. But, that's what the oil business is absolutely loaded with that kind of thinking. And for a woman to question what they're doing, especially a wife of someone working offshore, it was dodgy for my husband, you see. So you had to be careful what you said. You couldn't question everything they did. But whatever I did ask questions, I always got this pat on the head, oh, good little woman.
Jesus. Yeah. How is it that you go and see your MP and you let your MP know that this legislation, passed now, effectively gives corporations the right to bury whatever they want under the ground, and the MP couldn't give a toss?
No, my MP was brilliant.
Was he? Who is your MP?
Well, she's retired now and been replaced, unfortunately, by a Tory. She was a Liberal, and she said to me, look, my husband's a geologist. I'll take what paperwork you've given me to him, and I'll get back to you. And she got back to me within a fortnight. It was very quick, and said, I'm with you all the way. I will stand against fracking.
Her geologist husband said that Francis is absolutely spot on. This is right.
He did. Yeah, he did.
Oh, Jesus.
Which was really, really good for me. But unfortunately, she was poorly. She wasn't too well, and she retired. And the new guy that we've got now is a weak-chinned Tory who just does as he's told. And whenever I write to him, he just sends me back paragraphs that he's been given to pass to me that talk to me as if I know nothing. And that Claire Perry, she doesn't even bother answering my emails, and I've peppered her, absolutely peppered her.
How frustrating is that for you? I mean, look, you know, when I speak to somebody like you, obviously I finish, go off, I'll have something to eat, you know, I'll have a cuppa or whatever, I'll be sitting around and we'll talk about what you've been saying, and somebody will say to me, a friend or my missus will say, you know, aren't we totally fooled by films like The Insider? Aren't we fooled by Aaron Brockovich? The reality is that, you know, no media organisation in this country is going to pick up what you're saying and question those in power and refer to your work and your research. It's a terrible indictment on the media and on the political establishment in this country. And of course, whistleblowers are not protected in this country either. So there are people saying stuff to you privately who know that they could be destroyed if their names are released publicly, and they won't be protected. It's dreadful. You know, Walt Disney films all the time, oh, look, this woman stood up to the system, Aaron Brockovich and all the rest of it. Reality is totally different, Francis, isn't it? You trying to get people to listen to you is like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, I've been saying this stuff since we were at the Balcombe Camp. I was the treasurer for the whole 3 months at the Balcombe Camp in 2013, and I have been saying this to people since then. And to be honest with you, Richie, I am a follower of yours, and I love your programs, and I should have contacted you before. But you know how you don't like to push yourself forward because there are others that are taking the foreground, such as Tina, such as Vanessa, and I don't want to tread on their toes.
No, you're not treading on anybody's toes. There's room for everybody. A platform is a platform, and
right.
You know, you're obviously looking into areas that maybe others are not because they don't want to, but maybe because they don't know. All of the aspects of this are very serious. This is deadly serious, what you're talking to me about tonight, and you know, you've educated me. I didn't have any idea, and while I've been speaking to you, it's not that I've not been listening, I have been, but I've been frantically, with my fader down, I've been frantically looking into some of the things that you've been talking about, and what I'm finding while speaking to you bears out what you're telling me. I'd love to find something I could challenge you on and have a row with you, but I can't, because what you're telling me is borne out by what I can find by doing a few searches. So no, there's room for absolutely everybody. I don't know where we go with this, Francis. You know, these bastards, excuse my language, you know, are saying, oh, well, we'll just suspend it for 18 hours. Now, I know the earthquakes is another side of it, and we haven't been talking about that tonight. We've been talking about what you've discovered. They're just going to keep doing it, aren't they? What's going to stop these companies doing what they're doing, destroying the land, radio, you know, poisoning people, causing cancers? What is ultimately going to stop these people? Who's going to stop them?
Quite honestly, we're all of us that have been connected with the anti-fracking movement. We've all been hoping that there'll be just one earthquake enough to stop them. But I know that it won't, because if I'm right about what I'm saying, that these wells are actually intended for the disposal of nuclear waste, then they will carry on drilling, because they must create these underground caverns for them to dispose of this fluid. I mean, I don't know if you realise, but the UK imports nuclear waste for processing.
I've heard this before, yeah. In fact, I think go ahead, Francis.
We've even threatened the EU to send it back because they weren't cooperating with us on one issue or another. This is one mighty, hard-hearted country we live in. There is no two ways about it. It has no respect for us or for anyone else in this world. And when you see the way, for example, I'd like to get onto another topic that you don't really know about. And
just before you do that, it's 18 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Francis Leader, an anti-fracking campaigner and environmentalist who's experienced, her husband worked in the oil and gas industry, sadly passed away. Francis is convinced that his exposure to radon and other nuclear materials may have contributed to his illness and to his passing away. We've been on talking about depleted uranium perforation guns provided by Halliburton used in fracking in this country and elsewhere. People don't know anything about that. Francis, our listeners they're not confused, but they want me to clarify something with you.
Okay.
Fracking is a nonsense. It's a cover story to bury nuclear waste. Is that right?
I believe that it is. Yes, I believe that getting the gas out is necessary, first of all, to create the cavity. But the real objective of the exercise is to dispose of nuclear waste. Yes, that's what I think.
That's the headline. That's what I got from what you were saying, and it's my fault for not clarifying it. Listeners are agog, and I don't blame them for being... Right, you want to introduce... Again, look, people, the beauty of programmes like this are people can listen and they can decide themselves what they want to do with the information. And they can give me stick sometimes for not being more aggressive in challenging people like you. But like I said, I can't challenge it. I don't have the expertise to challenge it. And of course, we don't live in a fair world. In an ideal world, because I'm a real journalist, a qualified journalist, in an ideal world, I would bring somebody on from the fracking fraternity. And I would put them up against Francis, of course. And I would tell them, no, shut up, let Francis speak. And then I would say, Francis, shut up, let him speak or her speak. But of course, these people won't come on programmes like this. So you can't get that bloody back and forth. Francis, you were going to introduce another dimension of this. Go ahead.
Yeah, talking about the protests that are going on at various sites and have gone on at various sites since 2013. The policing has been absolutely over the top. When we were at Balcombe, I used to joke with the police officers there and say, "What, you got 7 coppers for every vegan here." Yeah. And that's how it was. We were usually heavily outnumbered. When we got to Barton Moss the following winter, it was crazy. It was just as bad, and people were getting thrown down in the mud. It was horrible. And at every site ever since, we have been over-policed, and the misuse of power has now got to the point where 3 of our protectors, we call them, we don't call ourselves protesters, we call ourselves protectors. And 3 of our number have been sectioned.
No way, Francis.
Yep.
3.
A young girl called Sadie Love. She did a lock-on through a pipe in front of Westby Road, which was just down the road from the PNR site. And she was locked on through a pipe to a young guy, a friend of hers. When they were released from this pipe and both arrested, they were taken to the police station. He was set free about 8 o'clock in the evening. At midnight, she was carted off in an ambulance and sectioned.
When was this?
This was only a few weeks ago.
Where is she now?
She's out. We got her out. We kicked up such a stink. Oh, Richie, I've never kicked up a stink like it in my life.
Yeah, don't blame you, yeah.
I wrote an article and it was mirrored by the Dorset Eye, and I tweeted it daily. I got it out, and in the end it had over 7,000 shares on Facebook. And I wrote about what had happened to this girl. Thankfully, we had film of her while she was on the lock-on, talking to the cameras, talking to journalists, and she was articulate. She
Lucid,
was far
right.
from mentally ill.
So what was that then? Was that retaliation? Was that kind of like punishment, you know, to kind of say to the rest of you, look what we can do to you if you don't play by our rules? Wow.
Yes. It's the 3 guys, if you remember recently, the 3 guys that were arrested for truck surfing.
Yes.
They had just been released from prison. So they put Sadie in a nut house. So what they were saying was, okay, so we can't get you through the courts, but we can put you in a nut house on a 28-day section, and there's nothing you can do about it.
What would have happened, Francis? What would have happened? Who has the authority to section? And just for our overseas listener, when somebody is sectioned, they are sent to a psychiatric institution for evaluation. Who has the authority to do that, Francis?
The police can do it under what they call of Section 135. they can recommend that a person be sectioned, and then they have to get one doctor to confirm it and then another doctor to reconfirm. And how they managed to do that with Sadie, I have no idea, because the girl is as sane as they come. But it wasn't just her. There's another guy, Ian Conlan, who was protesting at Kirby Misbeton Camp in Yorkshire. He plays the violin and sings hymns at the gates. That's what he did when that camp was active. He was driving home and they sectioned him. This Christian chap who just plays the violin and sings hymns. Another guy, Arthur Mellish, he was on camp with us at Balcombe for the whole of the summer. He was sectioned recently for 3 months. It took 3 months to get him out. So it's not a one-off thing. It's not. Sadie wasn't a one-off thing. There have been 3 that I know of, and there may have been more that, that just haven't got in touch with me.
This is becoming a bit of a recurring theme, people being sectioned for various things, whether it's talking about Wi-Fi or whatever. You
were interviewing Suzanne Small, weren't you?
Yeah, she got in touch with me. That was so bizarre that I didn't believe it at the start, because I am very sceptical. I've become sceptical over the years as a reporter, and I rang the institution in Surrey and was able to confirm that she was indeed there. It was a bit messy in the beginning because I had the wrong name, because Suzanne Small is not a real name, and I eventually got a real name, and then she was sending me pictures from inside there. She was a bit highly strung, fair enough, and she was a bit heavy-handed in terms of she was annoyed when her doctor didn't believe her and she bombarded her with emails, but it didn't mean she was mad or in need of being restrained or protected. Punitive. Faisal is listening to this with great interest, and he's tweeting that it's punitive sectioning. This is going to be a new thing, Francis.
Well, when I made the article explaining what had happened to Sadie, I got a lot of health professionals really angry, getting back to me saying it's virtually impossible to get a bed for anybody who is genuinely in need, genuinely mentally ill. So how on earth can a perfectly sane girl be sectioned by the police and get away with it? And I was like, well, you tell me. I've no idea how they're getting away with this.
That's the next question, of course. My next question to you was inevitably going to be, has Sadie or I think you mentioned you mentioned 2 other gentlemen, Arthur I think was one of the men you mentioned, have they looked into their rights, or are the police covered in terms of the legislation? What can they do? Can they do anything? Can Sadie say, look, my rights were violated there, you can't just do that? Is there anything she can do?
Well, I know that Ian has made a complaint, an official complaint to the police about the way he was treated. They even tried to do him for dangerous driving as well on top. So he's had quite a battle going on to get, what he wants to do is get the sectioning expunged from his record. Arthur, he was just grateful after 3 months of being force medicated. He was just grateful to get out. Whether he's considering doing anything about it, I really don't know. I need to ask him.
Yeah, I hope so.
Sadie has disappeared. That's how freaked out she was. She got back to camp, spent a couple of days on camp, and then suddenly just, poof, done.
It might have been a scary enough experience for her. I can't imagine it myself, but maybe it's given her the creeps. I mean, why wouldn't it, to be sent to a place like that? And they're not nice places. And again, that's not to be hurtful to the people who need to be there. There are people with psychiatric problems and they need help, and God love them. But at the same time, I've visited 1 or 2 of these places over the years. They're desperately morbid, awful places for people to be. I mean, Suzanne gave a great description to me of, effectively living there for 5-6 days and listening to, people in terrible turmoil and torment. Horrible. Maybe it's put the willies up, Sadie. You can understand that. You can understand that, can't you?
Oh, definitely. When Arthur was inside, he was giving us what he called like a video diary, and it was amazing what he was able to get out. And the thing that really upset me was I know Arthur very well because we spent 3 months together on the Balcombe camp, and I was literally watching his personality shut down day by day. He got more and more kind of flat-faced and unemotional as the days went by, and this was because he was being force-fed these medications that he was looking them up and absolutely horrified at what he was finding. He objected, and so they then forced injections on him. And when that happened, we're talking about a zombie in comparison with what I know the guy to be capable of. I was gutted. But he managed to get out eventually, and only a couple of weeks ago now, and I'm hoping that he's recovering okay. But this is not the first time I've heard about stuff like this, Richie. I've been an activist for 51 years, and I remember the poll tax riots, and guys that were arrested for that came back chemically coshed from prison. I remember when we were at Greenham Common, anyone who got arrested at Greenham Common stood the chance of being sectioned, and some were. Their children could be taken into care. These are the threats that you have if you dare to say, look, I don't like nuclear weapons.
Step outside the herd, yeah. Because that's what they're doing. They're creating a reality where people will come to accept that if you step outside the herd, if you say that you don't want to be vaccinated, if you say that fracking is dangerous, we're going to declare these things as truths. And if you say anything other than that, well, you must be mad, so you need to be locked up. That's the reality they're creating. I can see that happening. That's beyond Orwellian, Francis, isn't it? Beyond Orwellian.
Amber Rudd, I wrote to Amber Rudd, when was that? I think it must have been about 2015 or 16, and I was complaining about the fact that Geyser Tariani, he's known as Geyser Frackman, he was doing a hunger strike outside the gates of 10 Downing Street. And I complained to her that no one was stopping to talk to him. Nobody was giving him the time of day. And she wrote back and told me that he needed mental health assistance. And
how the hell would she know that? How would she know that he needed mental health assistance? That's disgraceful, isn't it?
Yeah, she even gave me a telephone number for the Samaritans for him.
Francis, that's beyond disgusting, isn't it?
This is what we're dealing with, Richie, and have been dealing with since 2013. I cannot give you any idea of how much abuse I've taken from people in the industry, from the police, from undercover coppers that are actually mixed in amongst us. There's just so much heavy, over-the-top misuse of power that you just know instinctively that they are hiding far more than they are telling.
Francis,
otherwise, why would they do this?
Why would they do it? We're just about out of time for today. But listen, I'll obviously make room for you again in the future. Just before we run out of time, give our listeners who've been listening intently, there's been a lot of tweets, by the way, you'll be able to see them yourself when you come off air. Give our listeners quickly, as quick as you can, a couple of links where they should go. I've already mentioned your own personal Facebook page even, Francis Leader. That's Frances, folks. Leader, Leader. Where else should they go, Francis?
Well, Anti Fracking International is the most active group. It's at more than 10,000 members now, and we've got people contributing to that from all over the world. And so I would recommend people come and join us there. But also, if you go on if you prefer to be on Twitter, there is there's half a dozen places I could recommend. Frack Free United is a really good group of dedicated people, and they are always posting and sharing my stuff as well, so I'll give them a shout out, definitely.
Listen, thanks for doing it. I really mean it. Really appreciate you getting in touch, and thanks for sharing that information with us, Francis. More power to you. Stay in touch with me through email, and like I said, we'll certainly be picking this up again in the near future. Really appreciate your time, Francis. Thank you.
I appreciate yours too, Richie.
Not
Take
at all.
care.
It's an honour. Thank you. Francis Leader there. Incredible stuff that, you know. I don't mean incredible in terms of it's not credible. I don't mean that at all. But it's dot connecting stuff that, you know, the idea that what's really going on here is the burying of nuclear waste. You know, listen, we're just about out of time. Right, I've only got time to tell you. First of all, thanks very much to our guests today, by the way. Really, really interesting stuff today. The Waco stuff that you might have missed. The programme will be on. Dick Reavis is on. Struggling here. Dick Reavis was on from Texas talking about Waco. You've just heard Francis Leader there. The programme will be on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify and all the rest real soon. Just time for me to remind you that I'm on air tomorrow for 90 minutes from 1 p.m. UK time. That's 1 p.m. UK time tomorrow, where I'm going to be talking about a couple of issues, male fertility, but also this move, this aggressive move in the last couple of days in the UK to compare the parents of children who haven't been vaccinated, to compare them to child abusers. Ghislaine Langto, former doctor and author of The Medical Mafia, will join me live tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks again to Dick and thanks to Francis. I've been Richie Allen and you've been listening to your Richie Allen Show. There's nothing like it. He says arrogantly, it isn't arrogance. Nothing like it in this country. Anyway, thanks for listening. See you tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a very rare Friday show. Bye now.